The Question, aka Vic Sage, a very underrated DC hero, who wasn't always DC, instead having started off as a Charlton character, who like the rest of the bankrupt company's line of heroes would be absorbed into DC Comics, that during the 80s Crisis event. The Question in the late 80s would get a solo title from DC, 36 issues, or 37 if you count the Blackest Night Revival issue, which is a whole thing. Although I don't really count that because it's a separate story and not even about Vic. No Renee Montoya hate, by the way, she's a great character. She's just very different than Vic, and to read the entire series as a whole, it is very confusing when you get to the final issue and it's just Renee Montoya as the Question. That's because it's a revival issue. This comic went hard and is just an overall solid read for the fans of the detective genre. It's a personal favorite of mine, and I think it's just honestly a really good comic. We've actually talked about it before. I made a video covering the Question meeting the Riddler, which is actually one of my most popular videos, and a personal favorite of mine, although I'm biased. Today we're talking about the Question and Rorschach. Sorta. You'll see. But Rorschach does kinda appear in an issue of the Question. I mean, he does, but not in an epic way. Just kinda, oh, that was cool, which we're about to talk about. Rorschach is from the iconic Watchmen 12-issue series from 1986, a noir detective with a black and white worldview, often idolized by people who don't seem to understand the character. He's not meant to be relatable. Rorschach is Walter Kovacs, the son of a female sex worker who was raised and abused by his mother. He would become the costume hero Rorschach, where he would start off at first trying his best at the dual identity life, along with having a partnership with Nite-Owl. However, after the investigation into a missing little girl led to his sickening revelation that she had been murdered and fed to dogs, Rorschach would kill the dogs and the murderer, adopting a new lifestyle as just being Rorschach, becoming more unhinged and just, well, everything that happened and everything that Rorschach does in the Watchmen, including being killed by Dr. Manhattan. Now, as essentially everyone knows because it's talked about so much on YouTube, The Watchmen by Alan Moore was originally meant to use the Charlton heroes, but DC wouldn't allow Alan Moore to use them. Therefore, instead, he would create new characters inspired by the Charlton characters, with Rorschach being based on the Question. Speaking of the Question, he has had several origins, the first being from Charlton Comics from 1967. That being he's an investigating reporter who realized that sometimes to really investigate, you have to go outside of legal means. It's not really an origin, but more of just choosing to be the Question. Although the 1987 series would much further explore his origin post-crisis, this being after Rorschach's origin. He was born Charles Victor Zaz, no relation, who was an orphan in an abusive orphanage. He grew up to study journalism, becoming a reporter taking up the name of Vic Sage. However, due to the trauma he had dealt with, he found himself dealing with violent tendencies. Luckily, he'd be trained by Aristotle Roeder into channeling that crave of violence into something good, becoming the Question. This is a really good update because while it keeps the baseline structure of the original, it is far more developed. Most typically talk about how the Question inspired Rorschach, but this new origin comes after Rorschach's, and it seems that maybe now Rorschach inspired the Question. Their origins are actually pretty close now with the childhood abuse and trauma wages. The response, however, to that is very different. Now with all that out of the way, let's talk about the time that Rorschach crossed over into the Question comics. The brief crossover comes from the Question issue 17 from 1988. For a completely different plot point, Vic is reading The Watchmen, making it a fictional reality within DC Comics themselves. Vic briefly falls asleep where he dreams about being Rorschach, from a moment taken from the Watchmen book. This comes from Vic thinking that Rorschach is a good fighter, although Vic also considers him an angry bigot, which is a play in how the characters are deeply different. Similar start, but very different result. This was a very brief moment to reference the two's connection, an Easter egg to fans, and introduction to the world of the Watchmen to possibly new readers, who at the time might have not known of the series. I'm sure now everyone does. The Watchmen crossing over into the overexpanding DC universe is now likely more known as being from the Doomsday Clock series from 2017 to 2020. It took 3 years for the 12 issues to come out. It was meant to be 1 year. Anyways, this is far more a traditional crossover, with the universes colliding and characters getting to meet each other. It is also highly controversial because it is interconnecting the two universes, which was never meant to be the intention. Therefore, a lot of people did not like that choice, including Alan Moore. However, as said, Rorschach died in Watchmen, getting popped like a pimple by Dr. Manhattan. Therefore, Doomsday Clock introduces a new Rorschach, who's less extreme, named Reggie Long, which I get why they created a new character, or a new version of the character. However, narratively, I think it was a poor move to make. I get why they did it, because, well, he's Rorschach, and they're bringing in the Watchmen. Of course, they have to include Rorschach. Yet, I think it kinda cheapens him dying in the original one. Same thing with the comedian dying in the original one and coming back. Reggie Long was the son of the OG Rorschach's therapist. He'd be a survivor of the alien attack, but left with unrepaired brain damage leading to becoming the new Rorschach, who by being watered down just kinda feels like the Question. By peeling away the layers of what makes Rorschach Rorschach, you kinda just get the baseline structure of the Question with a little more damage in the head. Reggie Long isn't a bad character, mind you, he just doesn't really make a lot of sense to be Rorschach. Sure, he's kinda crazy, but not that pure insanity that Rorschach was. Nowhere as much. Where I feel like Reggie Long is an okay character, he just has a lot more in common with the Question and his quirks than he did with Rorschach. The fake version of the Question has also adopted a look homaging Rorschach in some appearances in recent years, although it's not consistent. And while I do think it looks kinda cool, I prefer the classic blue. That's the connection between the Question and Rorschach. Should I make more videos about the Question? I really like his comic. I also really like Renee Montoya as the Question too. We should do more Question videos. I think I'm manifesting it right now. Although I'm not entirely sure when I would get to do them because I have a lot of videos on the back burner right now. Just full on scripts, ready to record that I haven't yet. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.